mean, it could have looked like we were all in the same room.
Cool. All right, I think we're live now. Good stuff. Hello, everyone, and welcome to World Product Day. We are delighted to be joining forces for all the product tanks around Ireland, something we want to do for quite a while. So I'm delighted to be joined from Donald from Cork and Graham from Belfast. And I think we have a few tuning in from Derry and Donegal as well. So you're all very welcome. We're really excited for the speakers that we have lined up this evening. So yeah, quick shout out. Thanks a million to everyone for tuning in. Hope you enjoy the talks. Don't be afraid to get the questions in the comments. And yeah, I'll hand it over to yourself, Graham, if you want to say a few words.
Yeah, hi. Thanks very much, Ben. And it's great to be doing this with all the other Irish product tanks. It's really exciting, and we have a number of events planned for the next part of the year. So yeah, I'll hand over to Donald in Cork.
Yeah, similarly. Thanks, Graham. Thanks, Ben. It is very exciting to be having another All Ireland event like we did last year at this time. So, welcome to everybody dialing in from Cork and Dublin and Belfast and wherever. Over to you.
Cheers. Nice one, lads. Right, good stuff. Well, with that, let's see if I can figure this thing out then, and we can hand you over to Louise. So just bear with me now, and we'll get Louise set up. Hello, Louise.
Hi.
How are you?
Good.
Great. Well, look, I'm just going to hand it over to you now to present. So listen, first things first, actually, thanks a mil for doing this. We're thrilled to have you. We're no stranger to ProductTank, so we're delighted that you're speaking with us. So you should be able to see your screen now. So I'll drop off on this and then hand it over to yourself.
Thank you so much, Ben. Okay, and I hope everyone can see my screen. So I'm so delighted to join everyone for World Product Day. This is a really exciting day. It's great to have a day for us. And I was thrilled to be asked to speak today. And it's certainly about this topic. I know everyone thinks a lot about product leadership and how to move into it. It's something I've always thought a lot about, and I'm happy to share my thoughts on it today. And I'm also thrilled to be Randy's warm-up. I'm certainly looking forward to his section later on. So first of all, I want to preface my talk with a Dr. Seuss quote, because I think every situation can be described with a Dr. Seuss quote, and product leadership is no different. And I think the perfect one in this scenario is by the Lorax. And it's, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. And this makes sense here because product leadership is about caring and actioning the growth of those around you. Product leaders make their team become more than the sum of their parts. And product leaders do not necessarily have to have people reporting to them. The impact on the results is the same regardless. So let's talk a little bit about who are product managers. And I think a good example or good tell of the type of people they are is how most product manager podcast interviews, including the product experience one, starts with, so how did you get into product management? And the reason is because most paths have an interesting story to tell. And it's usually, well, I took this non-linear path, and then one day I looked in the mirror and said, hey, I'm a product manager. And my experience was the exact same. I was asked to be a product manager, and I said, yeah, because it sounded really cool. And then after I'd agreed to do it, I looked up what it was, because I'd never heard of it before. And I think this is the same for a lot of people. And it's, even though most of us fell into the role, the learning here is that actually it's because we're natural leaders. So we're organically carving ourselves a path to the seat that drives the change. We're like magnets to the room that steers the ship. And that being said, newer product managers are forming a more deliberate path to the role. It's now top choice for MBA graduates in the US, and companies are hiring PMs earlier as they scale and more of them. So it's becoming a more celebrated and known role. But along with that, there are some indications that the job satisfaction with the role is dipping, certainly between 2018 and 2019 per Pendo's research document. And there was a slight increase in people looking to move out of the role. So we need to keep an eye on this as leaders and emerging leaders. So how can we ensure that people around us are getting what they need from the role? And I think this could be paired with the fact that 80% of PMs say that their leaders are lacking in the core pillars I'm going to speak about. So we have work to do. How do we lead people who are self-starters, who are entrepreneurials, are those leaders, those natural leaders I was talking about earlier? And how do we not inadvertently make financial consulting more exciting again? And the answer to that is creating an environment in which PMs can grow their own success. So no helicopter parenting allowed. But this is not about setting carte blanche autonomy and then sitting back and hoping for the success to roll in. That's carving a harder path for everybody, especially if you have associate PMs around you. This is about creating an environment in which PMs can grow their own success, leveraging a strong product backbone, which you have helped forge. You are a trusted advisor on the work that they are progressing, and you are an active participant in their career growth. So they're the three pillars I'm going to focus on today. So we'll start with building a product culture backbone. And talking about culture, I really love this quote by Lara Hogan from Etsy. Performance issues more often come down to a cultural challenge rather than simply a technical one. And I like this one because it really speaks to how product culture is what sets the stage for the attitudes and the behaviors of how people think about and actually build product. It takes a lot of effort, consideration, and iteration to exist. It is not formed by those things we wrote on that wiki that one day. And product culture, for it to be a culture, it's not a paint by numbers. It's not a paint by numbers thing. And each company will have its own flavor, but there's certain basics that are constant regardless of what company you're in. And first and foremost, what really will set the stage for building that culture is knowing who you are and knowing where you're going. So if you do nothing else, set a vision. So this is to answer the existential question that a product team has, is where are we going? And you need to know where B is to get from A, and so your team can execute on that. So really putting a stake in the ground for what B is so vital for every other aspect of your product culture. Once you know where you're going, then it's about setting the themes and the KPIs, which are agreed ways for reaching your vision over a particular period of time. It's about forming a shared library of proving methods that take a team from greenfield research right through to production code. And I think this one's very, very important. And I like calling this a product toolkit or a product toolbox. And this one is so vital because one, shared learning is that a rising tide lifts all boats, but it really creates that fosters that shared learning, and more importantly, makes the scrappy reusable. It's also very important to set your product principles and your team principles for agreed ways of thinking and doing. And mixed in with that is role expectations. So you have very clear guidelines of what it is to be successful in the PM role in this team that they are in, whether they be an APM, a PM, a senior PM. People know what is expected, and also you guide them, holds you accountable, you guide them on how to get there. The rest is all your secret sauce that really makes your culture your own, but that's the layers on top of these baseline things. But you're not done there. because all of this falls apart like a house of cards unless you have strong psychological safety. And that is the belief that you will not be punished or undermined if you make a mistake or if you speak your mind. Without psychological safety, people make defensive decisions that won't get them fired, which are often in conflict with growth. It's a great quote by Glenn Holmes. So there's usually in most companies, you're doing some parts of this product culture very well, or a little bit of a lot of the areas. Your job as a leader is to see where people are struggling, where the team is struggling, where the gaps are, and then doing what it takes to overcome those gaps. It's really about holding up a mirror to yourselves and taking a how might we approach, and then biting off chunks at a time and iterating. But keep in mind that anyone can go off and create shiny new things. A leader is what gets other people's fingerprints all over it. So not only are you creating momentum and ownership and buy-in, but can also stand without you. You're not a single point of failure because it's a team that has created it. So that's really setting the culture within your team. But to truly drive product best practices, you really need to manage up and around you. So a rule 101 in life is don't be a black box. But a lot of product teams, myself included, back in the day, have been called a black box. So people outside the product team kind of think that ideas go in and magically features come out, and it's a little bit of an unknown quantity. So a product culture that's documented removes that curtain and peels back into just clarity, understanding, and also trust that you have very good ways of thinking and also executing on product strategy. It's also useful for your own team to have things written down, but it also helps the teams around you. And digging into making other teams around you help you with what you're trying to do, you really need to proactively manage any change that's going to impact other teams. Because on paper, everyone will agree that product best practices are great. Do all of them, all the things. But if they see impacts that may put their work at risk, then you're going to hit more roadblocks than jump over them. And I love this quote because it describes the situation so well by the authors of Flight of the Buffalo, that change is hard because people way overestimate the value of what they have and underestimate the value of what they may gain by giving that up. So to really be successful at driving product culture change, you need to be thinking about those that will be teams outside product that will be impacted by the change, and walk in their shoes and think about some of the anxieties that they may have once they learn about the change you're trying to implement. So just like with your customers, it's building empathy with people that are impacted by your work. Some examples are sales leadership might have anxiety when they hear that the product team want to involve customers in discovery, because what if some of the stuff that isn't working comes up in that conversation? How might that might derail contract negotiations? So that's understandable, but it's about working with sales leadership and speaking about the value of customers feeling heard, customers contributing to really good decision making of what you go after, and that great feedback loop when customers also see that the product progression is related to the experiences that they told us about. But in the same token, work with sales leadership to understand, you know what, sometimes it isn't a good time to talk to this certain cohort of customers. So respect that, and start small. Start with a small group of customers. Bring sales into those conversations so they see customers' eyes lighting up when they're able to talk to people about what's not possibly going well, and and more than just feeling that they're being sold. Another example is engineering leadership might have anxieties when you want to use more engineering time in experimentation, workshops, and in problem definition, and possible involvement in throwaway code. Who's going to be feeding the team? Why aren't we just cutting production features all the time? That's where the value is. So this is about bringing it back to actually some of the greater anxieties that engineering leadership usually have, which is about feature bloat, maintenance, the cost of delay, what about possible refactoring? So all of this buildup of tech debt is usually related to a lot of stuff that just wasn't needed in the first place. So talk to them about avoiding that buildup of cost, but also maximizing the value of engineers, because they're such amazing problem solvers. So we might as well use their full skill sets to actually have better outcomes for the company. Plus motivation of engineers being able to flex that muscle. The last example, I think, is really about the executive leadership. When they come to you with their next, can you do this next idea, they will have anxiety, probably more frustration if it's not taken at face value and implemented immediately, because you're now using metrics and research to really prove out concepts. So before you get to that point, work with people who influence the executive team and make sure that the change and your approach to that speaks to the mitigation of their investment risk, increasing customer satisfaction, and also value back to their company. And these are just a few examples that show how a considered approach can power the change you're trying to drive. Whatever you are looking to change, the message here is link it back and see who might be impacted. Involve them in the change so they can come along the journey with you. Because at the end of the day, everyone just wants increased success. So this is just about linking the change you're trying to drive back to the success they want to see in their language. And to not use, but this is a product best practice. So, because that's not going to get you anywhere, you might as well just shout into a black hole. Just don't do it. So that's the first pillar of setting up a product culture that also can operate within your wider company. The next pillar I want to move on to is becoming a trusted advisor. And this quote by Maria Shi really anchors this section well, which is, I measure my own success as a leader by how well the people who work for me succeed. And this is because product managers are not looking for leaders to swoop in and save the day. They want to save their own day using advice from people that they trust. And most of what a PM needs can be done through coaching and mentorship. Yet, only 36% of PMs feel they're getting the mentorship they need to grow their impact. So this is an area we all need to focus more on. And it's usually the area that can be lacking because we can get so easy just caught up in the busyness of the day. So to dive into becoming a trusted leader, I'd like to split it out into two sections: becoming an advisor and then really focusing on the trusted part. Being an advisor and not shortcutting to boss to move things along can actually be the harder path to take, certainly in tech's get shit done environment where continuous value, the pressure is just on all the time. And it can be alluring to get involved, set the stage, say how to do it, just to feel that you're going to get there faster. But it is a false economy to do that because it shortchanges everything and everybody. It shortchanges your team because their growth is stagnant. They can't grow if they're being micromanaged. They're not learning on their own. They're not being guided. It's more they're being given instructions on what to do. So you're actually always going to be caught in a cycle of doing that because you're not actually growing their own skill set to do it themselves. You're also shortchanging the company because a demotivated PM team, because they're being told what to do, is kryptonite to the company, because PMs are making critical decisions every day. And if they're not motivated to spend the time to make sure they're the right decisions, that's dangerous. And PMs are usually the ralliers of others. So if they're feeling demotivated themselves and just low energy, it can be an absolute knock-on effect to the wider team. And lastly, it shortchanges customers because the impact they see in the products that they're using is limited to just one person's point of view. And that one person has probably quite a myopic point of view because they're not the ones on the ground who really understand. So when you shortcut to boss mode, the only thing you're really growing is your own gray hair. And you can actually see mine because I haven't been able to dye my hair in now 2.5 months. The first step of becoming a true advisor is setting that product culture backbone that we covered in the first pillar. That is what instills the trust in you as a leader and also fosters collaboration and partnership as you're doing so. Once you have that going, it's all about asking more questions and giving answers, giving guidance on instruction, and also practicing situational leadership. And this is because unless you've hired Dolly the Sheep clowns on your team, which is very unlikely, you're going to have people on your team with different backgrounds, perspectives, experience, and all of that diversity is your strength. The worst thing you could do is try to make a cookie cutter. So your approach needs to be different depending on the person you're working with and also the situation you're in. So the message here is it has to be personal to make it impactful. Sorry. Oh, no. Sorry, everybody. There we go. Okay. So let's go to the trusted part of being a trusted advisor. And the first step of becoming that trusted advisor is building that psychological safety. This is your team knowing that testing and iteration is the prudent approach. It's knowing how to extract learning from failure. And we talk about this a lot as a product community. There's so much about it online, but when it comes down to brass tacks, so many PMs are still saddled with the responsibility of having all the answers, of being held to dates instead of value, being called blockers instead of risk mitigating superheroes, and their informed pivots are seen as mistakes. And in doing so, we're knee-jerking a lot of PM teams into perfection is the enemy of good behavior, which is when the PM team focuses too much on perfection, so they actually never get to good enough. Or even worse, they become so jaded that they stop questioning at all, and they become idea implementers of influential stakeholders and also very loud customers. So, oops, sorry, just my train of thought there. Ah, yes. So due to that, we have this perfection approach that keeps on seeping into software development, even though if you ask any rational person, they would say, well, of course you can't get perfect on the first try. But yet it still has this this hangover in how we treat a lot of our PM team. So we need to drive the culture of iterative learning across the company. And as a shame, my unicorn came too soon, but I really like this quote. One, that I got to use a unicorn, but I also love this quote. by Neil Patel. He's an online marketing expert, and his quote is, "Perfection in its elusive glory is like a unicorn. Sure, it sounds great, but who's actually seen one? I'd rather ride a real horse than wait for an imagined unicorn." And it's this thinking that you as a product leader need to work laterally across the company to get people on board with this concept. And it's your team, that trust part is your team knowing that you're advocating on their behalf as you do so. And you have their back as they take risks. And you keep on doubling down that a unicorn is not possible in Rev 1. So that is the second pillar of being a product leader. The third is being an active participant in someone's career growth. And I'm going to start this section by actually PM in HubSpot, Heather Hart. And she says, I think she sums this up for all of us. I want a product leader that is willing to challenge me to constantly push myself outside of my comfort zone because they know what I'm capable of, even if I don't. And I like this quote because it really showcases the importance of being involved in people's growth. As one, it helps them, but it also helps the value that they add back to the company and their future companies. And this section is specifically relevant for people managers, as our product is really our team. And at the heart of any product success is progression. And what is more exciting than a conversation about career progression? Yet, only 33% of companies feel that their leaders are good at these conversations. And why is that? Because managers and leaders get so caught up in the busyness of the day that they don't make time for the personal side of being a leader. Is how can they help their team members grow and where do they want to be? It's also related to leaders being afraid to have these discussions, because if you start talking about career progression, what if people start thinking about career progression and then leave your team? But the reality is your team members are thinking about this anyway, so get involved. Part of the job satisfaction of a PM on your team is knowing that they're growing their skill set and their confidence to move off your team one day to a new challenge. So whether you like it or not, you are not their everlasting world, but you need to play an instrumental part of it. So this is about asking your team members, where do you want to be in X years' time? And then helping forging a path for them to get there, which is focusing on particular skill sets, and then also potentially maneuvering things on their behalf so you can create opportunities that may not have existed before, because you have where they want to be in your head. And be prepared. Some people may say, you know what, I want to change to a different team. I want to change to a different company, or I actually want to move out of product management. All of this needs to be okay. You will also have scenarios where you have some people on your team who are just not a good fit for product management long term. So for people who want to move out of it, or people who actually would be a better fit for other roles, it is your responsibility to know enough about those people to suggest roles that would chomp at the bit for their skill sets. So they're the three pillars of being a good product leader. Let's talk more about the path to get there, because it is a path. Because sadly, product leaders do not magically fall from the sky. I really like this quote by Maya Angelou, because this is what we're doing every day. Do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better. And product managers are learning how to be leaders every day. It's about honing skill sets to drive progressive change, not divisive change. Seeing where the struggles are and learning what it takes to overcome them. And as you move through your career, your circles of influence become wider, and then therefore, so does the impact you can go after. And if you were to focus on 5 areas to help you drive that path, these are those. The first is to start, because being a leader does not need the word leader or manager in the title. You can start today. This is all about driving influence, and product managers are very good at that. So lean into influence outside of your own sphere. The second is, it's not all about you. A product leader, their superpower, or superpower you learn and you hone over time, is learning how to maximize the value of those around you so they can also grow too. This one is very much about a rising tide lifts all boats. The third here is create a legacy. What are you creating today that will add to your product culture and your company that can be sustained after you leave? A measure of a good leader is how their team thrives after they've left. And that's not because they were doing such a good job or they're doing such a terrible job. It's because they're doing a good job and they've left something sustainable after they've left. And every interview candidate I interview, I ask this question. It's, what is the legacy that you have left behind in each of the companies or roles that you've had? The fourth is rally. So being a leader is also about focusing on the health of your team and the making sure people are feeling that they are contributing to something that makes sense, that they are celebrated when success happens. Sometimes PMing can be a struggle. I think we all know that. It's a hard job. But the rewards are so high, it's all worth it. But when you're in that messy middle, as it's called, it's really important that you're an anchor that keeps the momentum going through rallying. Say thank you. Last, but very much not least, it's don't be the white rabbit in Alice in Wonderland, which means don't get caught up in the busyness of the day. The work and the deadlines, it's very easy to just focus on those things and not on the other 4. But if you just do that, you're not actually building anything. You're not driving true growth. And you're not able to help those around you, create a legacy, rally the team. So everything suffers if you get too caught up in the busyness of the day. And everything here is about iterating and learning. I know I'm a better manager this month than I was last month. And I know I'm going to be a better manager next month than I am this month. And that's the point, is that we are all growing. And Yamini Rangan, our Chief Customer Officer, said about 3 or 4 months ago that leadership is like a mountain without a top. You're never at the top planting a flag saying, yeah, I made it, I'm here. And I thought that just summed up this so well. And it also allows me for Dr. Seuss to take it home, because he talks about this mountain. And I think this sums up the concept about also starting. So you're off to great places. Today is your day. Your mountain is waiting. So get on your way. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks, Louise.
You're very welcome.
That was great. I'm not too sure if there's a few questions there that might trickle in, but if you have a question for Louise, please drop them in the comment section.
Yeah, glad to answer any questions.
Yeah, if not, then we might do a quick rally around at the end. I think there's a slight delay in this, so we can maybe pop back on for questions after.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Cool. Cheers, Louise. Thanks so much.
You're so welcome. Looking forward to Randy.
Yes. So, hello, Randy.
Hello.
How are you
doing?
I'm good. How are you getting on?
I'm doing great.
You made it from Berlin. Randy's just joining us from Berlin.
Yes, I feel very much like I'm doing Live Aid. I don't have Phil Collins' hair, but I do it again.
Cool. Look, we're delighted to have you on board. Thanks so much. And Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you know the gist here with StreamYard. You can
Yeah.
can take it away.
Fantastic. Well, I think my entire talk is essentially an extrapolation of Louise's Maya Angelou quote. So I absolutely loved it. That was really, really great. But anyway, hi. I'm Randy Silver. You might already know my voice if you listen to the Product Experience podcast, but we might not have met. So, hi, this is me. This is what I look like. It's really great to meet you, to be here, to be part of World Product Day, and especially it's ProductTank's 10th anniversary today. And I've got to admit, I really miss going out. I miss being at events and conferences and meetups, and I miss having an excuse to put on a nice shirt. And you guys have given me that excuse. I haven't worn anything that needs to be ironed in like a month. So thank you. The talk was supposed to be about what the hell do we do now, but my wife is Irish. I've spent a lot of time in Ireland, and I've watched a lot of Father Ted. So I wanted to make sure that I was giving a title that was appropriate to the audience. I'm here today to talk about a book I just wrote and released. It's called What Do We Do Now? A Product Manager's Guide to Strategy in the Time of COVID-19. I'll start off telling you why I wrote it, and I'll give you most of the advice that's in it, as well as what I've learned since finishing it. So, tiny bit about me to kick off. I get bored really easily. I do a lot of things. Most of them are focused on talking to people and trying to learn as much as possible. As I already said, I co-host podcasts with Lily Smith. She's the pretty one, and you get me. But we talk to some really amazing product people every week, and I hope you do listen. I'm also a consultant for my day job. I work with companies on things like leadership and discovery and communication and collaboration, prioritization and alignment. And the secret is if you get those things right, everything else pretty much takes care of itself. And I also host a regular virtual lean coffee, which is called Products in the Ether. You can learn more about that one at pita.social. And it's just it's a lean coffee for product people. It's really fantastic. We've got a whole bunch of beautiful nerds that get together each week and talk about whatever's on their mind. And it's a lot of fun. So a few months ago, I started talking to people. Oh, I was going to talk more about the book. Let me do that first. A couple months ago, I started talking to people, and I kept hearing the same thing. They kept saying things along the lines of, COVID is coming. COVID is coming. It was very, very Game of Thrones. And I found myself having the same conversation with people, and it came down to things like this Mike Tyson quote, who's a surprisingly good philosopher. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, and we definitely got punched in the mouth. And the people I was talking to, the product managers and the product leaders, were having the same kind of problems and the same kind of concerns about what do we do and how do we do it and how is this going to affect us. And those conversations ended up with similar advice, which seemed to resonate. So I sat down to write an article to see how that would go and take that conversation from one-to-one chats out to a much wider audience. But the article just kept going and going and going, and it grew. And I thought, might actually have a book in this. But it's a really bad time to try and write a book. They usually have a lead time of months and months. How am I going to do this? So I sent a pitch to Jeff Gothelf and Josh Seiden. And I did that for 3 reasons. The first is they run Sentence and Respond Press, which is a really fantastic publishing company with lots of books around product and design and leadership and strategy. And they're all designed to be read in about an hour or less. Also, they're absolutely brilliant guys, and I figured if they agreed with the type of things I was saying, then I was definitely on the right track. And finally, I thought they would be able to turn it around quickly, and they'd also go with my plan, which was this is not the time to be trying to do something like this for profit. I want to figure out how I could help. I can't make PPE. I'm not someone who's qualified to help find a vaccine. So every penny of profit from this is going to charity to COVID-19 relief. It's going to Medicine Sans Frontières or Doctors Without Borders. So I absolutely urge you to buy it. It's really cheap. I think it's around €4.10 on European Kindle stores. And the dirty secret on it also is it's not just for product managers. It's for product people of all types, anyone who's doing anything with priority and strategy conversations. So buy it for your team, buy it for your boss, buy it for your stakeholders, and it's all for a good cause. That's enough about pitching you on the book and telling you about me. Let's get into the real details. What is it that we should do now? So I've broken this talk up into, I think it's 6 parts. And the first one is about going back to basics. And we really do need to go back to basics right now. And one of the basic things that we do is discovery. We should discover what is different about the current situation than where we were before. And that's working with stakeholders, our executives, our customers, our partners, our teams, ourselves. Review the roadmap, review your priorities, and figure out how we work it. And really, everything I'm going to talk about is expanding on that. So the first thing we have to get right is our strategy. But what is strategy? Strategy is about understanding the problem and understanding the customer. It's about understanding the market. And it's really about understanding how you propose to help your customers solve those problems better than anyone else can. And we do this stuff all the time. This is basic table stakes for us. We use the double diamond approach. And I know it's a cliche, but I'm going to say it anyway. Are we solving the right problem? And are we solving the problem right? But it's this kind of thing that we need to go back to right now. We need to go back to it because we often skip it once we get past those early stages of product development. We do this stuff in a discrete discovery phase, but there's no such thing as a discrete discovery phase. And when things change, the first thing you do is go back to basics. And I love this double diamond approach so much that I used as the basis for my logo. But let's go back and take some of these things in turn. Let's start with customers and their problems. So we do this. We figure out who are we trying to help, and what are their goals, and what are their obstacles. And we do this with personas, and you do have personas, right? But we need to go back and ask some new questions of these personas. We need to know for each persona, what is that person's current situation, and how might that have changed from their previous situation? What relevant habits do they have that may have been affected or changed by the crisis? You know, the hardest thing to change is somebody's habits, but there's this massive external stimuli that's had this effect on everybody right now, and we need to take that into account. I mean, just look at us, for example. I should be with you, we should be talking and having a beer afterwards, and that's going to be a little bit harder than we should do. And, you know, it's Ireland. I would have had a really good beer. But also, if you do change things for people, for your customers, are they in a position to use it? Do they have the cash? Do they have the same priorities? Do they have the headspace? Do they have the access to use whatever you do? I was talking to a product leader last week, and she was mentioning how her company uses jobs to be done. And what they had to do was just reprioritize which jobs they were focusing on. So they really integrate jobs to be done into their personas work, and it sounded like a really great way of doing this. But let's look at some real examples of how companies have refactored what their customers do and how they're better serving them. I've heard about auto insurers that are actually giving money back to customers, and they're able to maintain profitability. They don't need that extra money. They'd like it, but they're engendering goodwill instead because people aren't on the road as much. They're not getting into accidents. They're not lodging claims. So the company is able to maintain profitability and still give money back to their customers. Early on in this whole situation, here in the UK anyway, I know that breweries pivoted to make hand sanitizer and other companies pivoted to make proper protective equipment. Around me, some local shops started doing weeklies, deliveries in weekly baskets. And now they've got a recurring revenue stream that might go on well past the end of this. And the online groceries whose systems were able to scale did not have logistics that could scale. They could handle 2 to 3 times at most in terms of logistics, and they're not able to do the customer acquisition that you think a time like this might create as an opportunity for them. Their technical systems worked fine, but logistics did not. There's other companies here. Unmind and other wellness apps started giving away their services for free to NHS and other frontline staff. Intercom's added a free tier for nonprofits, and Notion's opened up a whole lot more at their basic tier. A couple months ago, you heard about Zoom everywhere taking over the world, and Google and Facebook have been trying to catch up because they were able to reprioritize what their customers needed and what they were able to do for them. Okay, but customers don't exist in an isolated space. They exist in the context of the market. And, you know, no one predicted this, and almost no one planned for this situation. And if you think you know where your company, your industry, your team, where you're going to be in a year's time, I want your crystal ball. And a couple months ago, it was easy to look forward and say, there's going to be disaster. And we've certainly had that. We've had a huge loss of life. We've had entire industries in deep trouble, and lots of us have lost our jobs. But for those of us who have jobs, there's also massive opportunities. When we start working on new products, one of the things we do is we take a look at the market and the gaps in it. Where are the opportunities? What's the space that we have a right to win? And that could be on price, it could be on quality, it could be on availability, it could be on features, it could be on usability. There's any number of places we can go to operate that we might take advantage of this. And we look at the players that are currently in the market, and we map out what we can offer and where we have the right to win. But any work that you did in this space more than a few weeks ago needs to be revalidated. How do you know, based on the assumptions that you had before, who's going to go out of business? Who's getting acquired? Who's going through a merger? Who's getting bailed out? Who's going to release that killer new feature that's going to totally change the way that the entire market operates in your space? And we all want to build a defensible moat around our advantages. But whose moat is now crossable? What assumptions about the market is your positioning, your roadmap, your release plan all built on? Take a look at that, re-examine it, and revalidate it. And don't just do it once. Do this continually. Every few weeks, we need to take a look at it. And there's a few different things, a few different techniques that we can do. Two very good models are scenario planning and Wardley mapping. If you've ever heard of Wardley mapping, it's something that will totally blow your mind the first time you try it, probably the first dozen times you try it, but it's really powerful. I talk a bit about them in the book, and I'm not going to waste any time on them tonight, but there are tons of great resources on both of these things online, and I encourage you to look out for them and dive in. Let's take a moment now to pay respect to the thousands of roadmaps that have been demolished and suffered over the past few months. Because what's happened to our roadmaps is, well, from their perspective, an absolute tragedy. COVID's gone all gangster on our roadmaps. And we need to figure out how we're going to deal with this. And, we should be looking at our roadmaps and re-examining them on a regular basis anyway. But there's a couple of questions we really need to ask right now. Before we do anything else, we need to ask, is there something we can do to help with the current situation? Now, this has been going on for a while, and I think Ireland is much more advanced than the UK in terms of when you're opening up. So hopefully you've had this conversation already. But just to go over it very quickly, there's no right answer to this one. Early on, it was about making hand sanitizer and proper protective equipment and working on vaccines. Now it might be working on trials, but it's also working on education and wellness and any number of things. It's about making sure that your company and your employees stays viable and that people continue to have income and taking care of everybody. So like I said, there's no right answer to this question, but there is one very easy wrong answer, which is just to avoid the question. Make sure you have the question, you've had the discussion, and whatever you conclude is the right thing to do, that's fine. And then keep asking, is what we're currently working on still the best thing to do? And again, not specific to this situation. We should be asking this on a regular basis, but make sure you ask that. And if that's the case, think about, is how we're working the right way to do it? You might think about, can you change pace quickly? What's your release cycle like? Are you working on the annual releases, quarterly, monthly releases? Do you have the culture? Do you have the know-how and the muscles to change to continuous or daily or weekly or whatever the right approach might be? Because it's an entirely different way of working. It's different from a tech stack perspective. It's different operationally. It's different from a marketing and support perspective, both internally and externally. And it's different for your customers. Are they ready to take things on? Are they in a position to take new releases and changes and new features? So it's then that you need to do that reprioritization exercise. And there's a few things about this that I want to get straight. So we talked about the market analysis and the customer personas, and you get those right, and that's when you start to do your prioritization. And prioritization is based on a series of bets. And those bets are hypotheses, which then get prioritized. But bets are trickier than we think they are. Because a bet is, that hypothesis is based on two things. It's a fact plus an assumption. We know this. We think if we do this, this will happen. And we try and turn those assumptions and those hypotheses into facts, right? But assumptions are tricky little buggers. because assumptions can have an emotional component, and assumptions plus emotions equal opinions. An assumption can be proved or disproved by a fact. An opinion has a nasty habit of being impervious, of just repelling facts. So you need to be really careful of understanding, is this thing that we're dealing with an assumption or an opinion? And there's a bunch of different ways that we can map all this stuff out. Assumptions mapping and impact mapping are really good techniques. Theory of change is one that's used in the social space a lot. I personally like to use dragon mapping. It's my own version of impact mapping that I really need to blog about, and I will soon. And if you follow me on Twitter, you'll see that probably next week. But dragon mapping is impact mapping plus the 5 whys. It's for an impact or an outcome, asking, for this to happen, what has to be true? And then labeling that, is this a fact or an assumption? And if it's an assumption, is it an assumption or an opinion? And color code them or mark them off in some way, and then do your tests, to run some experiments, try and figure out how can we take these assumptions and these hypotheses and these opinions and turn them into facts as well, because we can stack facts together. We also have to go back and make sure that the facts that we mapped out before are still facts. When the world has changed, is something still true? Okay, next bit, let's talk about capabilities, because this is what we're living through right now. I'm sure you've all seen this before. This is not the new normal. I'm really tired of that phrase. This is not working from home. This is working during a crisis. And we need to be very conscious of that. We need to know who is available. Are they working? Are they on furlough? Are they working part-time? If they are working, how available are they? Are they working on things with, are they working on taking care of children or taking care of loved ones? Are they well or are they ill themselves? What tools do they have? And what tools do they not have access to? And do they have access to customers? It would be great if they did. And some people actually have more access to customers than ever before. But you need to be asking all of these questions. We already talked about deployment cycles a little bit, so I'm going to skip past this one. And let's talk about ways of working. There's a bunch of things that we can think about for this. I know a lot of people have video conference fatigue, and thank you for coming out to yet another video conference in your day. So ask the question, as you look at your diary, do all these things need to be meetings? Are they all giving me value? Go all Marie Kondo on it. If it's not giving you value, thank it for its service and put it to its side. And see, can we turn this into an asynchronous update? Can we do this in Slack or Teams or Notion or Jira or even email? If you can cancel a meeting, do it. Everyone will thank you for it. Make sure you have the right channels as well. There's a difference between a social channel and an urgent channel. If you try and put urgent things in with social, they'll get lost and people will get fatigue around keeping up with it. So have one channel that's only for the urgent communications, another one for social. And don't neglect social. Social's incredibly important. We need serendipity. We need accidents. We need delight in meeting different people and getting new contexts and finding out answers to questions we didn't even know to ask. And I've seen people do this with games nights. I've seen people do it with Friday night pub drinks at home. I've seen people do it with team lunches where everyone gets an allowance to order in a pizza and have lunch together at their desks. I've seen companies do things about changing the way they have their benefits to make sure people are as comfortable as possible from home. This picture, by the way, is of somebody's office, somebody I know, who sent me this early on in lockdown, and I was incredibly jealous because I can tell you my desk look and my work area looks nothing like this. So some companies are giving people allowances to buy a new chair or something that's comfortable, a new desk, upgrade their Wi-Fi, get a second monitor, whatever they need to be more comfortable working in their situation because their home was not designed to be an office. And one thing that I think is going to go away, or I certainly hope it's going to go away, is presenteeism. It's got to be done. The idea that people are monitoring whether your boss is watching, whether you're just sitting at your desk, giving productivity theater, appearing to be productive. It's just not efficient when we have teams working remotely at scale. I know some companies are doing it. I know there's software that allows for it, but it just does not work very well. we've all long had the superpower of talking about managing for outcomes over outputs, but this is really true now. And I think companies that can't do this, that can't communicate well, can't create alignment, that don't have the ability to allow people and teams to work autonomously within a space and understand how to do that productively and proactively, those companies are ultimately going to suffer and they're going to fail. So we can do better than we have today. Okay, there's one more section in the book. But before we get into that, let's have a bit of a review of what we've talked about so far. So classic pyramid metaphor, we start with you identify the opportunity space and review. Is this still the same opportunity space that it was before? What are the conditions that we're operating in today? And then how will we solve that problem for customers? We look through bets, assumptions, and facts and mapping all that out. And then we talk about how we're going to work on it. What are our capabilities and how do we work together? And finally is the last bit, the plan. But you do need to spend the €4 and change to get my thoughts on that. It is for charity. It's for a good cause. And I've talked long enough about all this other stuff. But there is one last thing in here. Something you've probably picked up on today. I've asked a lot of questions. I've given some answers, but I don't have all the answers. Nobody has all the answers. The important thing right now is to make sure that we're asking the right questions, that our teams and our management teams are having the right discussions, because that's what the job is. It's what we do. It's what we should always be doing. This is our superpower. Make sure that we're questioning our assumptions, redoing our roadmaps, looking at our personas and our prioritization, and learning all the time. There is one more thing, actually. I originally had pre-taped this and done a video of it, and it's fun. It's got a whole bunch of animations in it. I wear lots of silly shirts in it, and I'd love for you to watch it, except you've just heard me say pretty much the exact same thing, so you probably won't. But over the last couple of weeks, I've been asking people to tell me one thing that they've learned since lockdown began. And they've given me some fantastic things. And I've put that together into a separate video, and I'm going to release it totally separately, probably next week. But if you go to outofowls.com/one thing, and you leave a time code on that page, so it's a YouTube video, I think you go to about 19 minutes, and then you'll see just the fun bits that I can't include because streaming video through StreamYard does not seem to work very, very well. And I'd love to ask you to contribute to this as well. If you know the Ireland organizers, you might see some familiar faces in there, and it is a lot of fun. I'll ask you to participate and contribute. Just please use the hashtag #WhatNowBook. And that's it for me. Thank you very much for inviting me. Please stay in touch. Please do listen to the podcast. If you want to talk to me about anything, that's at the Out of Owls address. And you're more than welcome to come to our Product in the Ether. We do them right now pretty much every week. It'll probably go to a little less often once lockdown ends. Thank you again.
Cheers, Randy. Thanks so much. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Where could we find out a bit more then? I know you mentioned the book. I'm not too sure. Is there a place we can find the link for the book or anywhere else?
Good call. Yeah, that's also at outofowls.com. It's featured very prominently.
Okay.
And it's on all the Amazons. It should be on all the other ebook stores. We didn't do physical books at this point simply because we didn't want any frontline workers to have to get involved in distribution or delivery at this point.
Cool. That's fair enough. That makes sense. Yeah, I see there if there's any questions that come in, but I guess just with your kind of your exposure, your wealth of expertise across those different industries, have you seen any kind of use cases, good or bad, of people that are trying to adapt in this kind of crazy pandemic time?
Tons of good ones, like we were talking about. I have a friend who's talking at the London ProductTank right this minute, and he and I did Berlin earlier tonight, and he's involved in a car sales startup in the UK, and they were able to deal with it at scale. And when NHS workers and everyone else were being encouraged to travel, and the traffic rules were changed here in the UK, they were the only ones who could help people out who needed new vehicles or replacements for their vehicles. Like I said, I've seen Brewdog here in UK and Scotland, which still one country at the moment, but tenuously, went to making hand sanitizer, and lots of other companies doing that. And then you've seen Google and Facebook, like I said, really following on from Zoom and trying to get where they do lots in the meeting space. And there are tons of people. I mean, something that really surprised me, actually, when I talked to a bunch of people in the last couple of weeks, I assumed that they would be depressed around their roadmaps being disrupted and the opportunities that they had mapped out not being there. And what I've actually seen is a lot of people excited about the opportunities they have and how can they take advantage of them. Met somebody who worked on an ancestry site. And, that's a hard one to get people really interested into. It's more of a hobby than anything else, and people do it very quickly. But actually, all of a sudden, lots of people had a lot of time on their hands and were really curious about their relatives and were they still going to, it sounds morbid, were they still going to be around, and mapping it all out. And they actually had an absolute run on their site and on their services. And the question they have now is, acquisition is no longer the real challenge for them, it's retention. And in the past, they had to work equally hard on both, but now they can focus on one specific piece.
Nice. I think a question you touched on it there, just as we'll see a few questions come in, but I'm just going to hog this time for myself, if that's okay. But I guess, again, with some of those teams that you're working with, I guess the working remotely, well, we're kind of used to it, doing it maybe bits and pieces of it before, but I think when we go all remote, it can be a bit of a shock. And I know we're kind of adapted now at this stage, but have you seen any, I guess, trends or things that are working particularly well for some of those product teams? And again, what's maybe working not so well?
I think it swings and roundabouts, to be honest. Early at certain points, people said, "Well, this is great. I can get a lot more done." Some people said the availability of their execs and stakeholders has been fantastic because they're not traveling anymore. On the other hand, the availability of their stakeholders and execs is a double-edged sword on that one, because they're asking a lot more questions. They're paying attention to things that they may not be best suited to. I have a friend who works at a traditional retailer, and their physical retail was all shut down, and he was running all of digital, and the rest of the management team came over and said, we can give you a hand with that. And that was not necessarily what he needed at that point.
Yeah, I think, pros and cons by the sound of things to both sides. Okay, cool. Well, look, Randy, thanks so much again for joining us. We're thrilled to have you on board. Hopefully we might get you in the flesh now for ProductTank in Dublin, Cork, Belfast, or anywhere in Ireland.
I'd be delighted. My wife is from Tipperary town. We get over every so often. I'd be delighted.
God, you never know. There could be a ProductTank Tipperary yet. We'll see. But yeah, look, thanks so much for joining us, and we wish you all the best and stay safe. Thanks again.
Shlanta.
See ya. All right, good stuff. I think Louise has a few questions there as well that she's replying to in the comments. I think she's having a bit of technical difficulty, so unfortunately she couldn't get them in time. But we're going to wrap it up there, guys. Thank you so much to all who joined us this evening. Shout out to everyone across Ireland and all the other organisers as well that helped make this happen. And again, a huge thank you to both Louise and to Randy for joining us on World Product Day. I think, look, it works really well. This is something we wanted to do for ages, and hopefully we'll get a few more under the belt. Just keep an eye on the meetup page for the respective meetups, and we'll keep you in the loop for the next one. All right, guys, thanks a mil again. See ya.